Good day, music fans. This is Peter's Go for Music is a Journey, and for today's episode, I want to take a look back to the mid-1980s. I was inspired to put together this video when I was recently doing my Voivod videos, plural, and I was reading about how in 1985, Voivod's manager, Maurice Richard, put together a one-day festival headlining, of course, Voivod headlining, but featuring also Celtic Frost, Destruction, Possessed, and Nasty Savage. Now, during that time, 1985, maybe mid-1980s anyway, I was really exploring new metal bands, and I want to just take a trip back to a place called A&B Sound. Originally, this was a store that was just in downtown Vancouver. And when my friend and I were able to start going down there, which I'm going to say is probably about 1985, and I'm pretty sure we took the bus down the first couple of times until the SkyTrain started running from New Westminster down to Vancouver, and then later on from Surrey. But anyway, I'm pretty sure we took the bus down the first couple of times. And the reason why A&B Sound was important was because they had a special metal section. And in fact, while there was a metal section with all the latest stuff, like Ozzy Osbourne and Motley Crue and Iron Maiden and whatever, they also had a special section of the more underground stuff, particularly bands that were out on the Banzai label in Canada, which was basically a lot of the bands that were also on the Metal Blade label in the United States. But anyway, Banzai featured a lot of bands, of course, from North America, but also from Europe. And they were just a little bit more interesting because there was something about them that looked a little bit less high budget than, say, like the latest stuff coming out from Poison, Motley Crue, Iron Maiden, whatever. Anyway, that section was always really interesting, and it wasn't just Banzai, although that did make up a good bunch of it, but there were other bands there as well. And I found a lot of interesting bands down there, and I'm pretty sure that in my entire junior high school, there may have only been 2 or 3 other kids listening to that music. One of them being my best friend, who picked up a lot of the same stuff I did. And then there was a couple other kids at school too that actually knew some of the bands I talked about. Or if I told them about a band I found, they'd actually check them out. Pretty much everybody else was into Motley Crue, Led Zeppelin, Whitesnake, AC/DC, and all the common stuff. So anyway, yeah, A&B Sound was really great because they had that section, and a year or so later on, they opened up one right in the center of my hometown, Surrey, British Columbia, which actually has several city centers. But anyway, the one that was formerly known as Whalley and is now Surrey Central anyway, A&B Sound opened up there, and again, they also had that special metal section, so that was really awesome. Actually, Brian Vollmer from Helix was there for the Wild in the Streets album to promote it, and I went and had a chance to meet him and get his autograph and take a picture of him. But anyway, that's beside the point. So, yeah, after doing all these videos about Voivod, I didn't want to go around talking about them too much, but their first album, debut album, is important to this story. And I decided to just list these albums in the order that they released. They were released because that's probably the order that I picked them up, because I really don't remember which ones I got first and second and third and all that. So let's start off. This is going to be 10 albums that I bought during the time that I've been listening to again recently. Plus, I'm going to mention 3 more that I picked up within the last few years that I wish I had known about at the time. And of course, this is my list, and exactly 10 plus 3 extras. There are other albums that I had at the time which were great that I also got from that section, but you know, like Metallica, Megadeth, and Anthrax, probably a little more well known. Slayer's going to get mentioned in here just because the album I want to talk about was really important to this story. It just fits in. And then, of course, there were other albums that were really important at that time that I didn't get until much more recently, and there are still some that I don't have yet. But anyway, let's get on with the list. So, Voivod does actually start it off because their debut album, War and Pain, was released on August 10th, 1984. I went into that section, there were all the cassettes there, and I saw the War and Pain thing, and I thought, well, that looks like it's going to be a really interesting band, and I checked it out, and of course, as I have said now, probably at least 3 times, I really love this album. It is you know, for 1984, this was actually some pretty heavy, aggressive, brutal stuff. Snake's vocals, of course, are just this like awesome bellowing sound that seems to be taking hardcore punk rock a little bit further more into, I guess, extreme metal. The guitar playing is very interesting because even though it is the, you know, extreme metal developing onwards, Piggy actually can play some pretty cool, almost blues based and very more new wave of British heavy metal or traditional heavy metal style guitar solos. I think it was Suck Your Bone or Blower, whichever, but on those songs there anyway, there's some pretty fairly straight up guitar solo playing. As well, though, as what I love about this album, as I've mentioned before, I love how the bass is used in here, how there are songs where the music will, everybody else will stop and they'll just let the bass go for a bit as a transition to the next thing or something. And they did that on quite a few of their albums as well. The title track, Voivod, there is an awesome video somebody made this year for it. Computer animated type thing. It shows all these scenes of like factories, like metalworks factories, and then war scenes, and it uses the art of Away, the drummer, from I think all of their albums. Throughout the video you can catch glimpses of like animated figures and stuff that are based on his artwork from all of the albums, as well different Voivod logos appearing. It's a fantastic video. I love it, and made me appreciate the song once more. Of course, Warriors of Ice is one of my all-time favorites. Nuclear War, but there's some other great ones too, like Live for Violence and Black City. Even the title track, War and Pain. This is just, for me, this is just really a wonderful album of, you know, early extreme heavy metal. Love it. Okay, but now I have talked about Voivod an awful lot, so let's move on to the next one. Alright, now here is I guess it's a reissue on CD, and maybe it's a little bit hard to see the cover here, but this is Celtic Frost, Morbid Tales, originally released as an EP in Europe, a 6-track EP in November of 1984. It was later on released in North America with a couple of bonus tracks, extra tracks, actually pushing it up to a full-length album, I think just somewhere around 35 minutes long. And this CD reissue has a total of, I can't see, 12 tracks. 12 tracks, which I think also includes some demo versions and just kind of whatever recordings. I loved this album from the beginning. I thought it was just so brilliant. It is speedy and thrashy in places, but it also has these slower, heavier riffs, and just the way the band alternates between slow and then, of course, with the really gruff vocal style, and then later on going to the faster parts. I find actually one of the interesting things is Stephen Priestley, the drummer on here, his drumming is actually really cool. It's really like custom designed to go along with the songs. I feel like there'll be times it was, but then when the riffs change over or whatever, then he'll do this other stuff, and I just find that the drums really work well. You've got guitar, drums, and bass and vocals, and that's it, and he's doing a really fantastic job, I think. The lead guitar solos are kind of interesting because it's mostly just like similar, like all this like up and down the fretboard or whatever, but I just love the riffs. And one of my favorite riffs of all time, if I could make a list of my top 100 favorite heavy metal riffs, one of them is the one here for Procreation of the Wicked. I love how it actually starts as a straight up riff, like da da dun dun da 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 dun da da dun dun da 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 da, and then after a bit it changes over, goes like dun 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 dun. It's that like that pull and that bend, and it just sounds really cool. So yeah, and hey, the next album after this, To Megatherion, this was also really cool. I did get into the Pandemonium, which had some tracks that I liked, but I remember thinking it wasn't as good as the other two. And listening to them again, yeah, I do still have a special love for this one here, Morbid Tales, Celtic Frost. And interesting, it was Martin Ain, when they came to Canada to play the World War III festival with Voivod, Martin Ain actually took a demo of the band of Voivod back to Noise Records in Europe, and then got Voivod signed with Noise Records for the next album. Okay, so let's see here. Released in March of 1985 is Slayer's Hell Awaits. This is the, like, is there two album discs in here? No. Yeah, no. I don't know. I forgot. I just had to get this because this actually is still my all-time favorite Slayer album. I had Haunting the Chapel first, and I thought that was really good, and then this one came out, and I just love this one. I love it because the tracks are longer. They go through transitions. You similar to the Celtic Frost one, like you get these slower, heavier parts, and it'll switch over and go really thrashy and fast, or might go back to a little bit more traditional heavy metal. But I really like that the songs do that. They take you through different paces and changes, and I think with Rain and Blood, the next album, they just really went for the intensity a lot more. Shorter songs and just really hitting hard. But these ones have a little bit more development in the music, which I do really like. And also listening to the lyrics, when I was listening to this a few years back again, the lyrics are actually quite gruesome. And I would say that I think I watched a video where somebody was saying how Slayer was different from the other three bands of the big four in maybe Metallica and Megadeth were more socio-political or just about metal or about, even just like, I don't know, street violence or something. And Anthrax was maybe kind of similar, but Slayer, this is exactly like it's hell, it's vampires, it's corpses, it's more gory. And I think that I honestly feel this album is leaning in the direction of death metal. Not it's a death metal album, but I think it is pointing in that direction. And even on the cover, we have all these like demonic figures here, like ripping human bodies apart as they are descending into the flames of hell. Yeah, still love this album. Still my favorite Slayer album. Hell Awaits. I certainly remember seeing this album cover on cassette, a nice red, like the backing was really red cassette there, Exodus. I think I looked at it a few times. I thought the cover was a little bit dorky, but at the same time kind of catchy, and finally I bought it. Exodus, Bonded by Blood, sorry. Bonded by Blood, released April 25th, 1985. Finally the debut album by Exodus. The band had actually formed back in 1979, and from as early as 1982 they were releasing demos. Of course, Kirk Hammett originally playing on some of those older demos, I think. But it finally wasn't until 1985 before they got their first their debut album released here. This, I think, is terrific. It is what thrash metal is supposed to be. Originally, thrash metal was just really aggressive. It was fast, it was shouty, it was in your face, and it was just totally intense. Sometimes hellish type lyrics, songs about hell or Satan, and songs about gore and violence and all this. And there was an interview with Sacrifice, a band I'm going to mention. Sacrifice I saw from about 1990 or so, and they were saying that thrash metal was becoming really polite, and the lyrics were getting to be more environmentally oriented instead of less aggressive, and also that more and more bands were putting out softer songs. Like they were saying, like you had to have a ballad on your songs, and I think they're probably thinking ballad on your albums. They're probably thinking about Metallica, like Unforgiven, or Megadeth. What's that one now where he sings in French? I forget. But anyway, yeah, they might have been thinking about that. But yeah, this here, like originally, this is what thrash metal was like. It was just fast and aggressive and rah. The song that I always loved in the past was Piranha. That was the one that always stuck with me. However, the title track, Bonded by Blood, and the eponymous title, Exodus, this is just really a good, solid, intense thrash metal album. And I did get one album by Exodus a little bit later on, and it didn't have the same punch as I thought. Maybe it was getting a little bit more polite. I don't know. Okay, then, this one here, Destruction, Infernal Overkill. I finally got this on CD about 3 years ago. I had this on cassette, and I remembered that I liked it, and I didn't remember all that much about it, but after hearing it again, oh yeah, I remember this. This was really interesting because this was, I think, one of the first of the European bands. There's Celtic Frost, of course, but the vocal style of the European bands was clearly, I think, different from the American ones, where most of the American bands were more about the kind of shouted and almost like banshee type screeching type vocals at times, whereas, you know, with Celtic Frost it was the lower, gruffer sound, and here too it's almost leaning towards a black metal-y type sound in the vocal style, I find, you know. But anyway, another classic album, and in fact their next album, I forget what it's called now, damn it. This one is Infernal Overkill, the next one is Eternal Devastation, that's it. That one is actually listed as one of the like really important thrash metal albums of the development of the genre. But I had this one. This is the band's debut full-length album. They had an EP before this, similar to how Celtic Frost had an EP before doing To Megatherion. But anyway, yeah. I don't know what much to say about this, but of course, you know, because Destruction came to play in the World War III festival, I was listening to it again, and just it's really good to hear an album that I really listened to quite a bit back in the day. I don't know, what was my favorite song on here? Tormentor? No, The Ritual? They have a song on here, Thrash Attack and Black Death. I don't know. Yeah, overall, I like it. I don't know, maybe I should check out some of their more recent stuff. Is it any good? Okay. Let's see here, May 27th, 1985, just the 3 days after Destruction. Bathory, The Return. I think the full title is The Return of Darkness and Evil. This, you know, you have these other albums with, you know, like the Bonnet and Blood one, and the Destruction one, and the War and Pain one. And then you've got, like, Bathory is a moon in the clouds. And I just remember seeing this and thinking, I don't know what this band sounds like, but I'm going to get this album. And man, I loved it. I've talked about this in a previous video, albums that totally blew me away at the time I got them. I still love it. And there's some funny things about this, like the production is really low compared, like lo-fi compared to these other albums I'm talking about. As well, the drumming is, for the most part, not particularly interesting. It's mostly just straightforward, keep the beat throughout the song. And because of that, there's a couple of places on the album where the drumming actually does something more interesting. Suddenly there's like a flurry of activity and a new rhythm comes in, and that flurry like really gets your attention because the drums do not stand out for most of the album. But a couple of things that I really loved about this, the really heavy and distorted guitar sound. When the riffs are cool, man, they are really cool on this album. And of course, who was singing like Quorthon at the time? I didn't know anybody, and I still don't know anybody who was singing like Quorthon at the time. That kind of like witch frog-like back of the throat type of vocal style, which later on shows up in so many black metal bands from the early 90s. But you know, like people talk about Bathory's debut or Under the Sign of the Black Mark, but this one here still remains my favorite. I just love it. Still listening to it again the other day. Still love it. Especially on like Born for Burning, the riff in that. There's a riff in Sadist and so on. It's just a really cool album. I still love this Bathory album. Right. Razor. Yes. Let's see here. Razor. August 31st, 1985. This, I believe, was their third album. They had an EP. It seems everybody starts out with an EP. They had an EP, and then they did what, the Executioner's song, and then there was something like something to do with fire. I don't remember. Where apparently there was still kind of this more new wave of British heavy metal, traditional heavy metal sound that was getting, you know, thrashy in places. But this album here, I didn't really hear much of the other ones, but this one here, Evil Invaders, this is a really cool, fast, very heavy, great, solid thrash metal album. The vocals of the fellow named Sheepdog on here, man, this guy has got this, okay, again, I'm going to say banshee-like wailing scream. He's got this very gruff vocal style, but when he screams, it's just like, whoo, like the wind is just squeezing through some little narrow slit and making this wailing, haunting sound or whatever. It is a pretty intense album throughout. And I watched Metal Mythos, the Metal Mythos channel, the guy there, he did, I guess about a 30-minute video talking about the discography of Razor and what he had to say about that. Of course, the next album after this, Malicious Intent, was also good, but I think I like this one better. And then Violent Restitution, which was, I think, their fifth album, that is just a classic of thrash metal, but I didn't get that until just a few years ago. This one here, Evil Invaders, had it on cassette in the mid-80s, and I listened to it a lot. What are some of the great songs? Nowhere Fast, obviously Fast. Cross Me Fool is one people pick out. I like Legacy of Doom. Title track has an interesting, almost like a Judas Priest type riff in the beginning part. Iron Hammer is also really fast. Speed Merchants, just a really heavy, speedy thrash metal album. If you've never heard Razor before, you should actually check this one out, and as well, Violent Restitution. Oh man, yeah, here we go. Jeez, Possessed, 7 Churches. Let's see, released October 16th, 1985. Pretty simple cover, but yeah, I had to have this. Man, this is really cool. In a way, I didn't like it as much as some of the others, just because most of the riffs on here are just really speedy and intense. They don't slow down as much, but they actually do. And listening to it again, there are a lot of change-ups in some of the songs, some very interesting ones. What did I really like on here? Fallen Angel? No, it wasn't that one. It was, I don't remember now. The one with the bell at the beginning. Dun, dun, dun. That one. Yeah, I forget which one it is now, damn it. But anyway, hey, yeah, the important thing about this album here is that this is really where thrash metal starts to become even heavier and more intense, but also the vocal style starts getting gruffer, and the lyrics, well, basically we're looking at getting even darker. And so for a lot of people, this is the beginnings of death metal, the movement kind of stepping away from thrash metal, moving into something more darker and more intense. The final track on here is called Death Metal. According to an interview with Jeff Becerra, he said that they were thinking of, there was thrash metal and there was black metal, and they wanted to have something to make them distinct from everybody else, to say, this is the only band playing this type of music. And they came up with the idea of calling it death metal. So that's what it was. It was a more intense and heavier and aggressive form of metal than thrash metal was. So, and yeah, they did the one album like this, and then they changed up for the next album. Didn't make it as dark or as intense, apparently. I actually haven't heard it. And then, I think there was an EP and then an accident. Jeff Becerra was at a bank and there was a robbery, and shots were fired, and he became, injured, and he's still performing, but in a wheelchair now. But anyway, lots of interviews with him out there. Anyway, just one of those very important albums in the history of heavy metal, just as Bathory's album and Celtic Frost albums were Possessed as well. And hey, they were also at World War III opening, one of the bands playing up there with Voivod. That was their first trip outside of California as well. Okay, coming down the list, let's see here, January 25th, 1986. Not on the Banzai label, but here is Sacrifice, Torment, and Fire. This was the debut album by the thrash metal band. Not from Toronto. They're from, where the heck are they? A little bit outside of Toronto anyway. This is, their debut album is something very different. Their later albums, Forward Determination, Soldiers of Misfortune, and one other one after that. It's behind me on the shelf somewhere. Yeah, this one here was the little bit more of the darker one. It had a kind of early on, it was kind of based off the Evil Dead series, I think. So it had that kind of vibe to it. In fact, this disc here has some the Exorcism demo, it says on the back, where they actually have some of the recorded dialogue from the Evil Dead. Yeah, it's a good solid straight up heavy thrash metal album. There is a bit of a Slayer influence in places on here, I feel, as well. They do have their own sound, though. They do have their own vocal style. Yeah, it's just a very interesting album, and this was the last of the Sacrifice albums that I got, because I had it on cassette before, and I always thought it was kind of cool, but not as cool as the others. But coming back to it now, yeah, actually I like it. I really like the album cover, too. I think I should get a t-shirt. The funny thing is, they've only ever released 5 albums in total, and they recently released a song for a hopefully forthcoming 6th album. However, if you search for Sacrifice albums on the internet, you're going to find a band with a very similar logo that is also a metal band, but they are from Japan. And I've actually never given a listen to any of their stuff, but it's just kind of weird because I was checking Sacrifice and it's like, hey, they've actually released 3 albums recently. And then I found out 2 of them weren't theirs and the other one was just the one song. So whatever, yeah. Anyway, Sacrifice, Torment, and Fire. I'm glad to have that back in the collection again. All right, the last one of the original 10 I wanted to talk about. This is Creator Pleasure to Kill. I got this. I loved it, especially the song Riot of Violence. I just love it's got that killer riff at the beginning, that really cool, but it's also one of those songs that transitions and changes and does something, and it changes speed and changes gears and so on. And I guess that I like that kind of thing, like in the really intense heavy metal, that they will actually put in a slower section and faster section and like this, as well as killer riffs. I really like that. A lot of other songs on here I really liked too. I remember it was really good to get this album back again. This one actually has a little booklet inside, and it actually explains the story behind this. And after they did their first album, when they were going into the studio to record this one, they brought Possessed's 7 Churches and Slayer's Hell Awaits to the producer and said, we want to make an album something like this. And so he said, I think we can try and do that even better. So yeah, this has remained, I guess, my favorite Creator album. I have picked up a couple of other ones since then. They're all good, but still love this one. This is just, you know, one of those albums that's in my heart. Okay, and what was that one there? That was released on April 1st, 1986. All right, so as I said, there are a lot of other albums from that same period. Some of them I had, some of them I got more recently, some of them I still don't have, but there are 3 in particular that kind of stood out for me as a surprise, but probably fit in with this. One of them here, this is Exhumer, Possessed by Fire. I think I probably never heard of the band, or I might have seen it and just thought, I'm not getting that. But actually, this is a really good, solid, intense thrash metal album. Still probably along the same lines as Exodus, Bonded by Blood, or Metallica's Kill 'Em All. That kind of thrash style. They're a German band. Not one of the big 4 in Germany. But anyway, this is a great thrash metal album. And was it released November 8th, 1986? Yeah, I wish I'd actually heard it back then, but at least I can hear it now and enjoy it. All right, another one. 2 days later, November 10th, 1986. This is Sepultura's debut album, Morbid Visions. Of course, they had an EP before, like everybody else does. This, it is, you know, they're more famous ones, like Beneath the Remains and Arise. This one here is a little bit more intense, and I feel a little bit more darker as well. It's almost like that point in intense extreme metal in the mid-80s where it was based around thrash, but you could hear the beginnings of black metal, you could hear the beginnings of death metal, and which way would the bands go? This is that kind of album, I feel. Now, the funny thing is, when I heard about the background story, apparently the band was just really, still kind of immature as a band. Like they said in the studio, the guitars weren't even necessarily tuned properly for some of the recordings. I don't know. But I think it just sounds really brutal and intense, and it's just a terrific mid-80s extreme metal album. It just shows the potential of this type of music. So Sepultura's Morbid Visions, apparently inspired by Morbid Tales, although the sound of the music is very different still, all except for the gruff vocals. Okay, and I'm going to start here with this one here one more time. It seems that the camera suddenly shut off while recording. Anyway, this is Infernal Majesty's None Shall Defy, released in September 87. A little bit late down the line since I've been trying to focus on the mid-80s, but I heard this finally. I got this a couple of years back, and it is really impressive. It is the, again, very intense thrash metal album. It's a little bit on the darker side and more horror-oriented, as in like exorcism and possession and Satan and that kind of thing. But what really is impressive, aside from the more gruffer vocal style, is the music. It is it's more creative, more developed. It's not just straight up thrashing all the way through. Again, as I've been saying, I like these songs that have these different transitions in, that change speed and so on. And there are just some points where they change into some really awesome riffs, or sometimes a little bit darker riffs. And it's such a welcoming thing, because you're listening to a song that is blistering along, and the vocals are going about stuff in your ear, and then boom, there's this change, and coming in with this awesome, really cool riff, and then again it'll change over. And a lot of the album, if not most, if all of the album is like that. And what is it? We're looking at 8 songs on here. And I've been checking out a few reviews. There are not a lot of reviews out there for this album, but everybody is saying this is really a brilliant piece of work. So if you have never heard Infernal Majesty's None Shall Defy, you should check it out. And apparently they only recorded this one, and then there was a bit of a gap, and then they recorded another one, and there was a gap, and I think in total they've only done like 3 or 4 albums, and then that's it. But this one here is just one of those metal albums that came out that just made a statement. And I guess because they're from Canada, the statement was just not as loud as if they'd been from California or whatever. But anyway, that one, I wish I had heard this back in the day. Okay, so there you go. That is 13 albums from the mid-1980s, the beginnings of extreme heavy metal. Albums that just really made an impression on me, and 3 that I wish I'd had at the time. So that's it. Enough talking about that. I already got some ideas for some other videos, so I'll be back to talk about those ones when I get around to it. Thank you for watching. Leave any comments you like. Hey, if there's an album that you really like that I didn't talk about, actually, please tell me about it, because I might want to check it out. I might already have it somewhere, or I might not, and I think I should give it a good listen. Anyway, thank you. Suggestions welcome. See you in the next video. Ciao all.